Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 24, Master Gunnery Sergeant Leon Ransom Jr., Senior Enlisted Leader of Marine Cryptologic Support Battalion, a.k.a. the Patriarch. This interview is another delayed release from back in February, which is when he and I first crossed paths. Since then, he's come out to Okinawa during a command visit to check on his junior Marines. Upon arrival, I gifted him a set of the Marine Corps version of the culturally significant Shisha dogs to decorate his office back at the battalion. The spiritual guardians of Okinawa have much in common with Master Guns Ransom, and we're looking forward to his return to the Rock as he heads back here this summer. Admin note, the Top Game t-shirt campaign is still open for 6 more days. You can score yours or a hoodie at bonfire.com/top-game-podcast. All proceeds go to offset production costs. It's a simple text-based design that highlights a central theme to these interviews. Tell me who you walk with, I'll tell you who you are. Disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed on Top Game are those of the producers or the guests appearing on the program and do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in.
Sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, I saw John Tiffany leaving. I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's coming down.
Yeah, I just finished up with him. And then after we
You got a
pressed,
whole little setup here, huh?
yeah,
You ain't messing around.
this is Top Game. This ain't bottom game. So,
Wow.
so found it no issues, right?
I knew exactly where it was when I plugged it in. I was like, oh, that one. I thought it was over there by the Arundel Mills, but yeah, I've been here.
I was surprised to see snow coming down when I walked out of the building today.
Oh, I know. So was I. And I was glad to know that it wasn't cold enough to stick. I'm done with snow. Done.
We don't have a lot of snow in Okinawa.
Nope. You got a lot of heat though.
A lot of heat. a lot of humidity. But I grew up on an island, so.
Oh really?
It's
Which one?
Galveston.
Galveston.
South of Houston.
Oh really?
45 minutes. Yeah.
That's an island?
Yeah. It's a real island too.
Is it in the Gulf?
Yeah. It's a sandbar right off the coast. So when the Spaniards first discovered it, it was inhabited by a tribe of Native Americans known as the Karankawa.
Mm-hmm.
They were about average males were about 6 foot tall,
That's pretty tall.
yeah, which is somewhat large and out of character. And then they were also cannibals.
Oh,
Yeah. There's no fresh water on it. It's like I don't know like how they manage that. But there's some good eating between the crab and the shrimp and fish, flounder, speckled trout, red snapper. So if you can work a fishing pole or a gigging stick, you know where to go. You can live off of what the water provides. But they got water moccasins, coral snakes, copperheads, and rattlesnakes.
All on the island? Oh gosh. My least favorite animal and type of animal. Snakes and poisonous snakes.
So where are you from?
So I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon. Not on an island, but in a valley. The Willamette Valley. It's a small town. Not a small town, really. It's just a suburb of Portland. Hillsboro is the name of the city.
And pardon my manners, would you like something to drink?
If you got water, I'll take some water.
I don't have water.
You know,
I do have some whiskey.
Oh, you got whiskey?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take some whiskey with a little bit of that then with ice.
Yeah. I let it water down.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, watered down whiskey will work. These are not bad rooms.
No, I've been a Marriott guy for a little while now.
Yeah.
When I got assigned to DIA and did the JMAS thing.
Yep.
It's like 4 months of training. I stayed in a Residence Inn, and
Thank you, sir.
And that got me to elite status.
Uh-huh.
And then when I was in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I heard about your Dominican Republic story.
Which one?
On
one of the podcasts. Oh, with
you were talking to who?
General Stewart.
Yeah, General Stewart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vince told me about that.
Yeah, that was an interesting ride.
Yeah, I bet.
Because I was going to leave the Marine Corps.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I was going to go to an Army program.
Mm.
And when he found out about that, he was like, "Why would you leave?" And my point to him was because we don't have a program like they have that I was referring to, and we just don't have the structure for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to. If you're going to be in the Marine Corps, you got to be all in, and I accept that. So, but I was looking at this other opportunity to do this other thing, and because it was attractive to me for a variety of reasons. And he's like, but you'd have to exit the service. Is that what you really want to do? Honestly, not really. And so we, me, him, and Doug March ended up talking for several hours. And his Master Gunny Shaler was there for the conversation.
Yeah, I was at his retirement.
And he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse.
Okay.
Cool. As you know, General Stewart.
Yeah.
Salute.
Yeah. Salute. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've heard about your interviews. I haven't. I'll be honest with you. I haven't seen any of them, so I'm not coming here with any kind of unbias or anything.
So what'd you think about the fact that there's interviews out there?
I remember when I initially heard about it, I thought it was cool. Yeah, I did. There was a lot of good chat about it as well. A lot of people. I remember hearing about the guy in Hawaii that you had mentioned in my office.
Kevin Simmons.
Yeah, someone said that his was really good.
Yeah, it was very emotional.
Really?
He talked about how he put the mission first before his family.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us that do that.
Yeah, that is the truth. And sometimes it comes at a loss. Yeah, I can understand that. But yeah, it's a great idea. I mean,
it was one of the things that I've kind of been working against is, you know, the fact that, you know, by the nature of our OCFIL, we're very close hold with personal information. But I think sometimes that comes at a cost too.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just telling John that one of the things that I've been trying to kind of balance out is, you know, how connected I get with my junior Marines. You know, at the MEF, I'm in a confined space with a lot of junior individuals in a way that most master sergeants probably aren't. I think I manage it well. It hasn't bit me in the ass yet, but I think I'm vigilant enough. But, you know, I have them over to the house on a regular basis. Life is different on the ROC than it is elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, just recently, General Smith just announced that he's going to allow the Marines to get vehicles.
Is that right?
In a way that the Air Force already had been. So there'll be some equivalency there that didn't exist before. I think that's a good thing. As long as they understand that, hey, if you fuck up out in town, we're gonna hold you accountable. But until you do, enjoy the island.
Yeah. Okinawa has been an interesting place over the years.
So how many times have you been there?
So I've been there 3 times. All of them were TAD.
Okay.
2 of them were unit deployment programs, and one of them was just a short TAD.
So talk to me about that. UDP?
Yeah.
For
not unit deployment. I shouldn't say unit deployment. I did one 31st MU.
Okay.
And then I did one what we used to have back in the day called RBCT.
Okay. Det 5.
That's what they call it now. Yeah.
Now it's not that. It's all TJ.
Oh, is it?
OCAC liaison team Japan.
So yeah, yeah. Basically, you know, we're the signals environment for the MU. So that was actually a really good deployment. I learned probably more about tactical SIGINT doing that than I did on the MU.
Okay.
Just because, you know, I had to learn the radios, I had to learn radio wave propagation, I had to learn, you know, the different spectrums, UHF, VHF, HF. We had to provide all of it.
Right.
And, you know, we had to understand line of sight and, you know, with the Prick 104, you know, it works different during the day than at night. And I mean, I didn't get that kind of insight when I was on the MU because I was an E-learner. So that was a really good experience. And I did that for 6 months. I mean, we wrote scripts, made stuff up. We talked in weird accents. You know, I'm sure they do a lot of the same stuff now, but it was a good time.
So Elan's great again now.
Yeah, it's funny how it comes in cycles like that, isn't it?
It's like a sine wave.
It is. Fittingly, right. Yeah, I remember when I came in, about the same time John Tiffany. He was a little bit senior to me, but when I showed up at Fort Devens, he was there. And then ELINT was a secondary MOS.
What?
Yeah, it was not a primary MOS. You know, so we went through I came in as a 21. We went through Morse school, what they call BMB, AMB, beginner's Morse and advanced Morse. So beginner's Morse, you just learned Morse, and then advanced Morse, you learned how to put it into message traffic. Once you graduated BMB and AMB, then they sent you to Pensacola, and you learned it was 450 course.
Okay.
And then after 450, if you graduated at a certain level in your 450 course, then they automatically threw you into the ELINT course. And so by that point, everybody was like Morse code fatigue, you know, I don't want to do Morse code anymore. And 450 just sounds terrible and boring and patch cords and oscilloscopes and all that. I don't want to do that. So if it was considered to be lucky, you know, if you graduated at a certain level in your class and they offered you ELINT, you took it. Well, you know, Lance Corporal Ransom didn't understand the future of the 2631 MOS. So but you know, I made it work for me. I learned, I mean, I never copied Morse in the fleet. Because when I got out to my first duty station, which was 1st Radio Battalion, in October of 94, I showed up and I remember Gunny Grunberg was his name. And he had been through ELINT school when he was a young Marine. And myself and this other Marine named Brian Quickbear, he was a full-blooded Sioux Indian. We showed up and he was like, "You guys been through, are you ELINTers?" And we're like, "Sure. Yeah, I don't know, Gunny. Yeah, we're ELINTers." "You actually went through the school?" "Yes, we went through the school." "Okay, you guys come with me." So he pulled us back into the OCA, and we got stuck into the bowels of the OCA doing ELINT, working on what was called the TREE at the time, the Tactical Receive Equipment. It was like a big freaking box with a Pisky 5 in it and a demodulator and all this other stuff in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this thing? And then they had the display was called an S-tread, and that was supposed to be the dots on the map. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
Pisky 5, I hadn't heard that in a while.
Yeah, it was that SATCOM box that they had in the tree. And it was weird. It was a different world back then. And I was like, maybe I should go copy, because the 21s were getting all the love. The 31s were like, you know, the OCA trolls. But the 21s were out. You know, they were doing all the cool stuff. They were setting up you know, they're doing site selection and classes, and they were setting up cami netting poles and all this stuff. And I'm sitting in OCA like, what the hell am I doing? But I was fortunate because they threw me on a MU.
Which rad band was this?
This was the old First Radio Battalion
Okay.
when it was back in K-Bay. So I got slated for a MU as their E-liner. So that was cool. I got to, you know, and back in the 90s, it was all about the MUs, right? If you could get on a MU,
right,
then that was the cool thing because we didn't have OIF and all that stuff. So I got slated for a MU pretty quick. So, and then I just had a steady, kind of made a name for myself a little bit. I wasn't like, I wouldn't call myself a brilliant E-liner or SIGINer, but I just kind of made it. I think I made a name for myself because, you know, I was good at doing the Marine stuff, but at the same time, I was decent enough being on a detachment or a team or whatever where people felt like they could rely on me. I wasn't a turd. So, and back then in Radio Battalion, especially in the 90s, when MUs and small detachments were all they had, if you established yourself as somebody who was reliable and like, oh yeah, we can take Ransom because we know he's going to work or whatever, you tended to get put on the cycle of rotations, right? And then there were the other guys that were kind of left off, and they were like the FAPs, and they were the ones that would spend 3 years in Radio Battalion and maybe do a CAX, maybe, but that was not me. I did 5 separate deployments out of First Radio Battalion, my first tour as a Marine. So
yeah, I kind of fell into the same groove with that. I showed up as a sergeant at Radbin, not a fleet returnee. I was a 3-year clearance hold.
Holy crap!
Yeah. Previous transgressions before I joined the Marine Corps.
Oh wow!
Involving a firearm, and I'll leave it at that. I think I probably already went into it elsewhere, but essentially, there was a backup at Duncalf at the time, and you know, things being what they were. So the benefit was I got to have the first year of my son's life with my wife with no deployments.
Yeah.
And then I got orders once the clearance came in. Hit Goodfellow, hit Camp Lejeune, bought a house, got the family set up. And then for those next 5 years, it was 4 deployments to include 2 years at SOTG as an instructor evaluator.
Wow.
Because they rode me hard, put me to work, which is great. And then it was Gecko that said, hey, I'm going to send you to SOTG. You're untouchable in terms of deployment, as far as deployments are concerned. But I want you to make sure you pass on what you've learned up to now to the team leaders that are coming through while they're doing their PTPs. And I took that shit and ran with it.
Nice.
Because I recognize that. I mean, this is, you know, I mean, there's still conflict going on.
Yeah.
But he's designated me as, you know, kind of like a tribute, right? I'm gonna put this guy here, and the battalion is gonna reap benefits from his position there at SOTG. And I work with Mike Smith, Scott Fournier, Doug Gayton, were my chiefs as gunnies at the time, and I was one of their, you know, old hand sergeants. You know,
this was at second, right?
I was out there at Stone Bay.
Yeah.
Which, incidentally, is the site of Montfort Point.
Yep. Sure is.
Which never it never escaped me how important that was. And you know, but being there and during that time, it was, you know, even after I finished that little stint at SOTG, I got a MUDET as a staff sergeant, and that was a hell of a learning opportunity, to say the least.
Were you the staff NCIC?
Yeah, and the ops chief concurrently.
Wow, as a staff sergeant, man,
smiles and cries.
Yeah, I bet.
But
which meal was that?
22nd
22nd.
in 2008.
Okay.
But I did have an interesting relationship with the intel chief for the MEU because it was Mike Smith.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was the intel chief on the MEU?
That's correct. Yeah.
Mike Smith, the 2691?
One and the same.
Interesting.
Because his predecessor had gotten posted. So it just worked out. But that familiarity can sometimes lead to conflict.
Yeah.
Because we'd been together at SOTG.
Yep.
And then him knowing what I had in the cards and behind the green door made him a little bit more, I would say, to be fair, it made me a lot more transparent than I could have been otherwise. And it made it easier for him to reach out and snatch from me before he grabbed from other people. So it was constant battling.
Yeah.
And
I can see that.
When you roll with somebody often, you know the tricks, and vice versa. So I will say this to anybody. I love Mike Smith. He's a friend of mine. But man, I've also fought with him probably more than anybody. So I know what you're going through.
Yeah.
But
and he's back at second now.
Yeah. He's at second. He's at MEF.
Yeah, he's at MEF, and Nick Watson has given him orders to second. So when Sean moves on to MARSOC, Mike's gonna go back to second and backfill it. And
that's something I wanted to kind of dig in on, because it's part of the game that many don't see, which is when I got selected for Master Sergeant as a gunny, I got hit with a data cache of information. These are the things you're expected to know. And they started hitting me up with all these documents, and I'm kind of going through it, and some of it seemed half-assed. Some of it seemed to be like condensed wisdom in digital form. So it was kind of like hit or miss, but the do out was your dream sheet. Your three choices. That's what Willie Pasquale asked us for. And I chewed on it, and to be honest, I shot it to him late in the game. And it kind of reminded me of the Dominoes proverb: study long, study wrong. And I'd asked for Camp Lejeune because it was familiar to me. Hawaii, because we hadn't been there before. And then the third was Okinawa. I think I must have been the only motherfucker that put Okinawa on my list.
It's like everybody who gets to Okinawa, they say the same thing.
But I put Okinawa intentionally because I genuinely wanted to go there, only because when I reached out to Russ to kind of ask him his perspective, because he sees the long ball.
Yeah.
Or the long game rather, and I also talked to Jay, who was a platoon commander of mine when I was in a DLI as a fleet returnee. He was going through, and with Spanish platoon, and I've known him for quite a while, and so I asked him, and what he told me was, he says, as a Spanling, you hadn't had the opportunity to be out there in the Pacific. It would broaden your horizons in terms of like exposure to the fleet, because you spent plenty of time at Camp Lejeune. I don't think that there's anything you'll see at Pendleton that you hadn't seen at Lejeune. But going to Okinawa, you will see significantly more. And I will tell you, Sam, that Okinawa is probably the Marine Corps' best kept secret. And although there's probably a lot of people that wouldn't agree with him on that, I do, because I love it out there. From the weather to the people to the fact that when I checked in, I was the only 2691 on the island.
Mm.
Whereas now there's 5 billets.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like I was holding it down until I got reinforcements. But I came to understand later that the master guns apply a certain amount of input to the slating of the master sergeants, although the monitor may get final decision.
Yep.
So what goes on?
How does that work?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the monitor. That's the truth of it. So, as a master guns, Nick Watson is my second monitor. Okay, so Willie Pasco was the first monitor since I've worn the rank, and my experience with Willie was positive. And I need to back up because my predecessor in the seat for MCSB was Steve Berry, and I used to ask him the same question. We're an OC field run by master sergeants. He's like, yeah, but not really. It depends. But to get at your question, it does depend on the monitor and how he wants to do business. Ultimately, MMEA determines assignments, period. Right? That's their mission. The assignments, enlisted assignments. However, a monitor will come to learn very quickly, either the hard way or the wise way, that it is prudent to seek out the counsel of the senior enlisted within the community before pressing the green button on the assignments when it comes to the senior staff NCOs within the community.
When you say that, you're talking about master sergeants and master gunnery sergeants.
Yeah. Gunnies and below.
Have at it.
That's all
do what
there's
you gotta
too
do.
many.
Yeah.
Master sergeants, even with master sergeants, depending on where that master sergeant is going. So if the 2600 enlisted assignments monitor is looking to place a master sergeant at a rated battalion, let's say 2nd rated battalion, they only rate, let's say they rate 5. That's probably pretty close to what they rate. He's going to call Sean Nicow, right? Or if he's trying to go to 1st, he's going to call Shepard. Or if he's trying to go to 3rd, he's going to call Loretta and he's going to say, hey, this is what I got. What do you think? Willie used to do that. Now, when it comes to the E9 slate, my experience has the slate is pushed out in a spreadsheet. And then the monitor will say something to the effect of, this is what I'm thinking. Tell me what you guys think. So all 17 of us, or however many there happens to be, will either chime in or they won't. And it's all done via email. More times than not, before that slate is pushed out, there's already been some sort of verbal, communications with each of those individuals. Hey, this is what I'm thinking I'm going to do for you. And everybody knows who's moving on which year. So, I just had a conversation with Nick earlier this week. I said, hey, what are you looking at for the E9 slate for next summer? He's like, well, the movers are these positions filled by these Marines. So it's probably going to be more or less of a musical chairs for you guys. So I'm a mover next summer. Jeremy Doucet, potentially a mover next summer. There's a couple more. Rich Dudo, he's an off-cycle mover, so he's kind of the weird one because he's not a mover during the summer unless he chooses to be. That's kind of his call because he's coming from overseas, so he kind of gets he gets first.
He's got dibs.
Say. He does. I mean, he's in Okinawa. He's been there for 2 years on the company. He deserves dibs.
I've enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a smart cat. history buff.
Man,
I
like
mean,
nobody's business.
I know he knows history more than anyone I've ever met. But he's good. He is good. So that's kind of how it works. So he'll push out that slate via spreadsheet, and we'll provide our input. If anybody has any major beefs, like it happens. We had one this year. We had one recently. I mean, that was incurred a request mass, an IG complaint, a congruent, and it's still kind of brewing. And we just work through it. You know, you just kind of have to let the process play itself out. But for the most part, it works. Now, I know that is, it's certainly not scientific. It's kind of, backdoor, not really backdoor because everybody's in the open, but it's not really official. There's no policy that you can tie it to. I know that General Henry was talking talent management hugely recently, and I don't think he really understands how the 2600 enlisted assignments process is working. I know that he understands that we're a small group, and he was the company commander once upon a time. He was the regular battalion commander. Yeah, he was. So he's very familiar with 2600s, but I think he's more focused on the O2 community. When he talks talent management, he talks O2s. So we do it internally, and I know it's not really a solid answer to your question, but it really does depend on the monitor and how he wants to do business. I mean, technically, he could just be like, hey, you're a mover, I'm cutting you orders. But no monitor is going to do that. They're always, especially with E9s, they're going to give them a courtesy and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. And with my conversations with the monitor, I'll tell you that they have 3 priorities, right? So there's the needs of the institution, there's the needs of the community, and then there's the needs of the individual. And it goes in that order. So what does the institution need in this particular master gunnery sergeant or master sergeant based upon where they have been? So they're doing talent management. For example, the institution is heavily focused on the MiG, right? It is a stated priority by the Commandant of the Marine Corps.
Definitely.
Right? So with the implementation of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd MiG, it's very important that we staff those key positions, and I would consider a Master Gunnery Sergeant a key position at the MiG appropriately. So if Nick is looking at Rich Dudo, who's coming off of a 2-year unaccompanied tour to Okinawa at the MiG, and he explained it to me, and I was like, you know what, you're right. He had to kind of set me straight. And I've got 19 Master Gunnery Sergeants where I only rate 17. And I'm looking at a Commandant's priority. I cannot staff that Commandant's priority with a Master Sergeant. When I can't, it's hard for me to justify that. When I got 2 extra, right?
It's easy. Just say it's Sammy Castro.
I mean, you could. And I told him you could. And he's like, I could do it. But like,
it would ruffle some feathers.
It would. People would ask questions, right? So it boils down to the monitor and how he wants to do business. It boils down to inventory. What do we have, right? You got to take into account inventory. How many Master Gunnery Sergeants do we have? It boils down to who's declaring retirement. So they push it out about now. They'll say, okay, it's springtime. What are you guys' plans?
Who's in?
Right. Who's staying? Who's going to retire next year? What are you guys doing? Because that all drives the decision-making process for assignments, for promotions, for retention. I mean, and Master Gunnery Sergeants really are the linchpin for the rest of their respective communities. one Master Gunner Sergeant retires, that affects an entire junior enlisted population. I mean, it trickles down. So it's really important that the monitor ties in with the master guns of the community in terms of like what their plans are, what they think on who should go where, so on and so forth. It's I really feel for the bigger pop fields.
Yeah.
Like the O1 Master Guns, he is probably the most difficult guy that I've ever dealt with at MMEA.
So you mentioned earlier, like we are a community run by master sergeants.
We are. And what I mean by that is our monitors are master sergeant. Not the case with a lot of other MOSs.
Yeah.
Right? Master gunnies, they run enlisted assignments. Our Ockfields sponsors are all master sergeants. That's the monitor, the Ockfield sponsor, and the MGySgt and Marcor Syscom. So working requirements and working equipment, right, for the entire community. Those are all master on billets. I got it. Sarah Clark is a master guns sitting out of MGySgt, but she's sitting on a master on billet.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was a master guns billet.
So Johns was there before her, but they recently, with the modernization, they downgraded it from a master guns to a master on billet. I think it should be a master gunny billet. It's MGySgt.
Yeah.
Your working requirements affect that Ockfield for 5 to 10 years. But it is what it is.
No,
so that's why I say we're a community run by master arms.
You know, I had contemplated there for a minute asking Nick to transit to PCA over to the division for that EW chief billet. But I decided not to, just to kind of leave it as it is, because I think now erroneously saw that it would be a step down, but I think the division, at least 3rd Mar Div, needs legitimate input from the community. And the guy that we're sending there now is PCA and over from Intel Battalion, Gunny Duncan.
Is he a Master Sergeant Select?
Yeah, Master Sergeant. I think he just got promoted, so Master Sergeant Duncan. And
I know Duncan.
But he just got back from recruiting duty.
Oh, is that where he's been?
Yeah. And you know, when I had the conversation with the Durant somewhat recently, he said, because I brought that up, but I said, you know, I've been keeping a watchful eye on the 2600s that are at Intel Battalion, because I think that that's required. You know, it's new structure. How are they being employed? And I've been fortunate enough to be kind of Jane Goodall into the troop of guerrillas that are the O291s on Okinawa. They've accepted me into their tribe. They hold me close, and it started with Chuck Summers. I don't know if you know him. He used to be the monitor for the O2 community for a while there. But him and Master Gunny Dunn, Roosevelt, I don't know if you know him, and Craig Johnson's the other one that's out there now as the MEF chief. But they lean on me collectively. And so, you know, I'll go through and just kind of spot check on all the 2600s that they have there at Intel Battalion to make sure they're being leveraged appropriately as best I can, and providing, you know, some input. And
you sit at the
Courtney? I sit at the MEF on Courtney.
On Courtney.
But you can't, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. You can't hide in the skiff on Okinawa. And it's been my approach as the SIGINT chief for the MEF to cover down in the 3, to cover down in the 6. I log in at the 2. Morning report goes out. We're solid, and then I'm moving. I'm at the division, 2, 3, 6. At the division, I'm up to the ADC and the chief of staff. And if General Journey needs to ask me a question, I'm there, you know, reporting as ordered. That's how I view it. But that's come out of being the first guy out of 5, right?
Yeah.
When it was just me.
Yeah.
And so now, I got these other cats on deck, and I'm waiting for them to grab an oar, get to rowing. I need help, but I'm not waiting. I got to keep moving. And Nick did me a solid. And I don't know if it was a personal favor or if it was just the way the cards played out, but I'm getting a young staff sergeant, and I lobbied with the deputy at the G2 that I want an assistant chief, someone I can groom, and then I can kind of like identify what are our priorities of work, and I need you to cover down on these tasks, and here's why. And
a 2600?
2629.
Really?
Yeah. At the MEF, that we've never had that before. Hey, I want you to provide some input here. Boop, boop, boop. Link up with Radbin. Get in touch with the OCAC chief.
Nice.
And
do you know who it is?
Yeah, Lynn Smith.
That's good though.
So I get him after MEFX.
Nice.
I'm excited. I do well with a tight team, and I haven't really had that. I mean, I've got Marines around me, but they've got work roles that need to be accomplished, and I bring them in from time to time. And I found myself kind of jumping into the 26.5X domain, probably more than most 91s are required to. But there was a period in time where the 59 billet was gapped, when now Master Sergeant Hill came over to I Department, and Master Sergeant LaFarbe hadn't checked in yet.
Oh, that's right. Hill came from Okinawa, didn't he?
He did. But now I got a 29,
Nice.
and he doesn't have to be the SSO.
Right.
So
that's good.
I'm excited at that prospect. I've got some ideas and some thoughts as far as to how I can, facilitate not only his professional development, but the forward momentum that we've got right now in a way that hadn't been accomplished before. So
now, did you draw a staffing goal for a staff sergeant, or are you just getting hooked up with excess?
I think a staffing goal.
Really? Man, that's outstanding. That's good. I know one of the things that I set out to do, and if you should ever get promoted to Master Guns and you're in a position to where like you are the senior enlisted, I mean, there's really only one position for that, and that's MCSB. But maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know. But one of the things that I learned when I went to the commander's course with a bunch of sergeants major and 05 and 06 future commanders was they said, think about 2 or 3 things that you want to change during your tenure as your senior enlisted, as the senior enlisted, or as the commander. And so that's when I really had the vision to create structure within the Marine Corps for senior 2691s, specifically Master Gunnery Sergeants, to have more span of influence on the Marine Corps. Because the way I saw it was, and this is no knock on Master Sergeants, there's a lot of outstanding Master Sergeants out there. But I felt like the Master Gunnery Sergeants were not carrying their weight. That's a whole new level of influence that we were just not tapping into. And the 0291s were crushing it, right? So there's Master Gunnery Sergeant 0291s everywhere. The 2691 Master Gunnery Sergeants, we had like 6 of them in MCSB. Like a third of our Master Gunny firepower was sitting in one battalion at company levels, working for majors in charge of 50 to 70 Marines. And to me, I thought that was just a crime. So I pitched,
especially at that level of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you should be firing on all cylinders. And I pitched it at the OAG that one year in front of General Henry. And I pretty much, I built a little PowerPoint slide and I said, this is where they currently are. This is where I'd like to see them. This is our total population. And I pretty much said, I'd like to see them at the MAR4s. I would like to see them at the MEFs, to be honest with you. I definitely would like to see them at the MiGs because that's where they're going. Rated Battalion doesn't need 2 at each. And really, 3rd only had 1, but 1st and 2nd rated 2. They don't need 2 2691 Master Gunnery Sergeants. What's the 2nd one doing? And I would like to see them removed out of MCSP. Man, you would have thought that I just stole everybody's firstborn baby. There was a council of colonels up there, and they were all like former Rated Battalion guys, former MCSB guys, some former MCSB commanders. They're like, oh, Master Guns, we can't do that. We can't do that because if you remove that Master Gunnery Sergeant at that letter company, those sergeants major from the Army, the chief master sergeants from the Air Force, the master chiefs from the Navy, they're going to eat them alive. And that Marine company is just going to get rolled over. And I was like, whoa, stop. First of all, no, that's not going to happen. Secondly, if you got a master sergeant that can't hold his weight with another services E9, then maybe it's time for him to go home.
Pack your shit.
Yeah, because give me a break. Are you really intimidated by a master chief or an Army sergeant major or a damn Air Force chief master sergeant? No. And so, and General Henry, I remember, I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he was like, yeah, but Master Guns, you a superstar. They ain't all superstars. And I was like, well, some of them need to man up, and it got kind of like heated when I was standing in the podium there. But at the end of the day, I think they all agreed, especially when I said we need to redistribute our Master Gunnery Sergeant population throughout the Marine Corps and specifically throughout the OPFOR. They're just underrepresented, and God love the Master Sergeants. I know they're doing great things. Some of them are doing better than others. But I want to see a Master Gunnery Sergeant at the MAR4 sitting side by side with that 0291 Master Gunnery Sergeant. Because right now, I'm telling you, they are the SSO, or they are the systems guy, or they are the whatever, fill in the blank, because they're a Master Sergeant, and maybe they're a brand new Master Sergeant, and they don't really know. They're coming off of an SDA or something, and they don't know what they bring to the fight. Maybe they don't bring a whole lot to the fight because their background doesn't have a whole lot to offer. But you can't do that to a Master Guns. You take a 2691 Master Guns and you throw them out of MAR4, and 9 times out of 10, they're going, I'm not the SSO. I'm your SIG NEW chief. You don't want to use me that way? Well, I'll go find a place where I can be used, right? So I think General Henry, he saw the light. And ultimately, as, Intel department, he's the one who's going to slap the table. And the Ockfield sponsors got to moving, man. And long story short, all those Master Gunning billets, they're out of the companies.
So I will tell you one Marine's perspective. When I found out that was the way forward, and I didn't know that you were the one that was the impetus for that, I was like, fuck yeah. Mm-hmm. Because from my perspective, they got to them companies and they got loose and lazy and prepped for retirement.
Retired on active duty. I'm telling you.
And those weren't the Master Guns that raised me.
Nope. Me either.
And I'm glad that that's not an option anymore.
Yep.
So
a lot of people were pissed off though.
So I'm going to tell you right now, on Top Game, thank you. Thank you.
Well, and I know at the end of the day, there's what's nice to have, and then there's what we responsibly need to do.
Right.
It's nice as a Master Gunny to go to Augusta, Georgia, and be in charge of 50 to 70 Marines and be like, I'm just going to ride this out. Sure, that's nice. And I'll say just I've been in almost 26 years now in June. I'm tired. You know, the last thing I want to do is go to a MAR 4 or a MEF and have, you know, uber amounts of responsibility when I got kids in high school. I got, you know, I'm a divorcee, I'm a single parent, you know, there's a lot of stuff I got going on. But if it comes to that where I just can't carry the pack anymore, maybe it's time for me to go home. And maybe it's time for some of these other Master Gunner sergeants to go home. Like, if you can't do it, then it's time. Not 1% of the enlisted population makes the rank of E9. 1%. Okay? 1% of that 1% will stay until 30 years. That means 99% of those Marines that have come before them will not make E9. And 99% of those Marines that do make E9 will not stay the full 30. So there's no shame in saying, you know what? I've been in for 25 years. I'm a Master Guns. It's time for me to go home. There's no shame in that. Let somebody else do it. And I'm all about that. I'm always thinking that way, especially in my situation. Because, you know, I've been divorced. I have four kids with my ex-wife, and it's not easy. It is not easy.
Do you have custody?
I have custody of 3 of the 4. So my oldest son, I agreed to allow him to stay in Georgia because I was the ops chief down in Company D.
Okay.
And I agreed to let him stay there so he could finish all 4 years in high school. He had a good thing going in high school, and I didn't want to uproot him.
Yeah, it's hard
and pull him out of high school. And I mean, and it's a good. It turns out it's a great thing that I did that because he graduates this May. He's going to go be a Marine Corps officer, and he's got an NROTC scholarship lined up for him. So we're just trying to identify the school and everything. So I'm glad I did that.
So do you have a huge military presence in your family?
You know, I don't. Now, my grandfather and all his brothers on both sides, on my, let me back up. My mother's father, my grandfather, and all his brothers all served in World War II. So he had like 4, and they were all World War II guys.
How was that?
I got pictures of their time in the service. I mean, it's pretty awesome. I mean, they were so much older because he started his family in his 40s, so they were all way old by the time I came around.
But is there like an oral family history of what it was like to be in uniform during that time?
More so on my mother's side because she had 3 brothers, and they were all served in World War II as well. So I have 3 great uncles and 4 great uncles. So yeah, that's right. 3 and 4. So I had 7 great uncles that served in the military all during World War II, and all were in the war. The miracle of it all is they all came back alive.
Wow.
Which when you think about where some of them were, it truly is a miracle. Like I had one that was part of the invasion on D-Day. And then I had one that did the island hopping campaign with the Marine Corps.
Damn.
He was an artillery guy, but he came back alive. He was also a Korean War vet subsequently. I remember growing up, my grandmother used to always tell me, you know, your uncle Chester, his name was Chester of all names, right? Your Uncle Chester was a Marine, and he was on that island where they raised that flag, you know. And I'm a little kid going, that's cool. You know, I don't know the significance of it, not knowing I was going to be a Marine one day. But yeah, Chester, he was a Marine. And he was on Iwo Jima, Peleliu, Tarawa, all of them with I think it was 12th Marines. And I'm still in contact with his 2 daughters on Facebook. Thanks to Facebook, I was able to find them and maintain contact with them. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So the oral history part, it was really just like bits and pieces of stories. My grandfather was a Navy corpsman, and he served on a battleship, and they did multiple transatlantic trips. his claim to fame was he was in the Battle of Casablanca. So that was
Never heard of that one.
the Battle of Northern Africa.
Okay.
So yeah, he was in the Battle of. If you Google it, it was a real deal. It was a real battle, air to ship battle. Bunch of U.S. Navy warships were in a fight.
Yeah, it comes right up. The Naval Battle of Casablanca.
Yeah, the Naval Battle of Casablanca. He was in that battle. He used to always tell me this story that he was on this Navy warship, and he was like, "My name is Junior with my family." He's like, "Junior, you just don't know how men are gonna be until you see them in combat." And I'm like a little kid, right?
Right.
I'm like, what are you talking about, Grandpa? And he was like, I remember when I was on the ship, and my mom, it's funny because my mom tells me that he never talked to them about that.
Right.
But with me, he did. He's like, when I was on the ship, I was a corpsman, and when our ship started to get attacked by those planes, I would see men hiding in the corners of the ship, and I saw this one guy down there, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm praying." He was like, "You need to get your ass on that gun," and he was just like telling me how he was walking, because he was a corpsman, so he was walking around trying to render medical aid to different folks, and it was just crazy. I wish I would have had the wherewithal, or I was older in life to know to ask more pointed questions. But he was at my Marine Corps graduation. He, old as he was there walking around proud. He still had his ID card. And he never retired from the Navy.
Motivator.
Yeah, he used his ID card. It was old. It was like, he kept everything. When I was stationed in Hawaii, he used his ID card to go shopping in the commissary. Now, I had my ID card. I just wanted to see if they would let him in. Yeah. And they did. They didn't check the expiration on it or anything. He was just like, they were like, it was pretty funny. Now they run it through the. Oh, yeah. Now he would never get away with that now. Yeah. They don't game recognize game. Yeah. I mean, we've been through so many transformations of the ID card now.
So you mentioned 12th Marines. I've been synced up pretty tight with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, they're concerned about signature management.
That makes sense.
To be seen as to be targeted, to be killed.
Yeah, that's true.
Everybody's reading the mock. Everybody's reading the Foley.
Yeah, they're right.
And for Artie, King of Battle, they got to be on point.
Yep. You're right.
So they come to me with their problems, and the battalion commander. And I'm embarrassed to admit I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head. I had a Master Sergeant from the MEF had an office call with the battalion commander, and he tells me, he says, "These are my concerns, Master Sergeant, and I want you to just hear me out, and then tell me what you think." And he laid it all out. And so I explained to him some of the complications that we have with being overseas, the fact that Radio Battalion is in Hawaii, what their mission set genuinely is, what it isn't, but what some people think that they are capable of doing, and the amount of genuine priorities that supersede what he's trying to get at, and how I've got an uphill battle to overcome that in order to get him the answers of what do I look like, and so when it was all said and done, because I'd been in his office at that point in time about an hour and a half, he said, "That's the most eloquent no I've ever heard." And I said, "I'm not saying no, sir. That's not what I want you to take away from this conversation. What I'm saying to you is, not yet, but I'm working on it. I'm not giving up. I am stealing money from other organizations in order to get over to the East Coast to advocate on behalf of everything that is underneath the umbrella of 3MEF, to include you and your Marines. And I'm telling you that face to face, man to man, boot to boot, kneecap to kneecap. I am working towards this, but I'm not making as much headway as I would like to see. But just know that changes are coming in terms of policy, authorities, capabilities, and everything that I get my hands on. When I make a trip out to the East Coast, I will bring it back to bear to assist your command, because that's the requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I appreciate it, man. So 12th Marines is I'm telling you right now, man.
That's interesting.
They're in good hands.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to dig up some photos that my cousin sent me of my Uncle Chester and 12th Marines. They got a bunch.
Yeah.
And I should give them to you that you can pass off to this guy.
Oh, they'll love it.
Oh,
man, they'll love it.
Yeah.
They'll love it.
I got a picture of my uncle standing next to a GP tent with this little South Korean boy in Korea. And, you know, he was kind of a pudgy dude, you know, Arkansas country boy. But yeah, I'll get those to you. I got a few of them.
And you have to send me the originals. You can just scan them. And
oh no, I'll send you. Yeah, I won't send you the originals. I don't even have the originals, but I do have some that my cousins have sent me since I've made contact with them. Yeah, they got several. They got several, and the Marine Corps Historical Society down at Quantico, if you have a certain amount of information, they can provide you like battles that your family members were in. And
really,
yeah, you put in a request, and you got to have the name, you got to have the unit, and there's some other particulars.
Right.
It's the Marine Corps Historical Society. They're in Quantico. It's in that building right behind the Alfred Gray Research Center. They have a small little office back there, but you can put in a request and you can get. They got all kinds of information, man, that you can dig up, and they do it because a lot of folks want to know what I had an uncle or a relative, you know, that served in the Marine Corps. Oh, really? Yeah, he was in Vietnam. Oh, okay, I can tell you everything about that. As long as, you know, it's as good as the information that was put in there. But yeah, I still haven't done that yet. But I know some folks who have. Mike Stansfield did it.
Okay.
On some of his people. But yeah.
Yeah, so I was telling John Tiffany earlier, like I didn't know until after I joined the Marine Corps. My oldest son was born. I brought him home to introduce him to the family. And when I took him to go meet my great-grandmother,
mm-hmm.
his great-great-grandmother, I was so motivated. I showed up at her house in uniform with my son in my hand. And she told me the story of her brother, who was a Marine.
Wow.
1-1 Charlie Company, who they never found his body.
Oh, is that right?
She started crying.
Wow.
But
you didn't know this.
I didn't know this. We had the conversation in Spanish.
Okay.
Bear in mind, I'm the only Castro in my generation that speaks fucking Spanish.
Wow.
Because we had lost it, you know, that many generations in the U.S.
Yeah.
My grandfather still spoke it. My dad and none of his brothers, sister speak Spanish. None of my cousins speak Spanish. I learned Spanish in DLI. And so we have this conversation in Spanish where she's telling me the history or her recollection, right? Because you have to be careful when you're getting input from your family, because they may remember things differently or they heard from.
Oh, yeah.
So she's telling me the story, but what I got was he was killed or they never found his body, and they're still looking for him. And every so often they would come and ask for blood to test for DNA for some of the remains that they did locate.
Right. That mission is out of Hawaii.
Yeah. So years later, I get asked by my dad's oldest brother, my Uncle Robert, to kind of dig into the military history archives and see what I can come up with. But what I found was a guy by the name of Norman Campbell, who retrieved some dirt from the park that was named after this man. And like I said, I didn't know any of this up until when my great grandmother told me when I was there at the house with my son. So there's a park named after this guy in the same county that I grew up in all my life. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 23. Didn't know that there's a park named after a family member of mine.
Wow.
Who was a Marine, right? So he takes this guy, this other Marine, takes the soil from that park to the battle site where they never found it, where he was lost, and then brings some back. But then I found another guy by the name of Ron Broward, and the two of them, I don't know if they were rotating out, but they were going back pretty much on an annual basis to look for him.
Wow. Where was he lost at?
The Battle of Horseshoe Ridge in Chuncheon.
Oh. Okay.
So the story that I got was that they were surrounded. They set up a defensive perimeter on this ridge line, Horseshoe Ridge, and they dug in and just started mowing down Chinese to the point that the way that they described it was, and this is, his recollection to me, there were bodies on top of bodies. These guys were still, coming over trying to get them. Guns were glowing. Yeah. They sent Ruben Adame, who they called Sambo, because back then, Little Black Sambo, he was a darker Mexican than most. They called him Sambo. And the cartoon character, you know what I'm talking about? Bone in his nose and all of that.
Yep.
Right, so Sambo went back to get more ammunition and never returned. The best that they could guess was that he fell down the ridge line, or something, and when he tried to come back up, he was captured or killed or whatever. But yeah, I've it was interesting to me to get that story, in that roundabout way, and I've been collecting notes and data. Maybe I'll turn it into a book someday.
That's cool.
But it's just one
it
of those
sucks
things
that it happened, but it's cool that you're digging into it.
Yeah.
Keep pressing on that.
Yeah, but it's good to have that information, because I hadn't dug in that direction.
Yeah, definitely check out the Historical Society at Quantico. They only need a little bit of information, and then
the archives branch.
The archives branch. That's right. They'll provide you with a ton of information, mainly about the unit, the battle, dates, and things like that. And then there's that mission. Are you familiar with the mission, the recovery mission at Hawaii?
That's the mission that Ron Broward and Norman Campbell were.
Gotcha. Yeah, on Hickam.
Yeah. So you earlier when we were talking about the priorities, right, of the monitor.
Yeah.
And so I am regularly sought out by junior Marines, staff NCOs, on how do I approach the monitor about this.
Okay.
And what I tell them is, regardless of where your priorities actually are, you have to, almost like an 0211, conduct a needs values assessment of the monitor. And so when you present to him the information that you're trying to communicate in terms of where you want to go and why, you have to do it in this order. What's best for the Marine Corps, what's best for the OC field, what's best for the professional development of the Marine, and then you put what is really most important for you.
Right.
What's best for your family.
Yep.
You're going to put it in that order, but don't look at it as though you're putting the needs of the Marine Corps first. Look at it as though you're saving the best for last. Would you provide any rudder steers in that prioritization?
No, I think the prioritization is accurate. The one thing that anybody needs to understand, and something that I have learned, that when you talk to the monitor, you are always behind the power curve, because they have access to the entire community and they see things that you'll never see. And because they don't provide command staffing reports anymore, which in the past was an awesome tool because it actually projected when units would lose their strength and their numbers at which MOS and at which rank. We don't have that visual anymore. So we used to get those every month.
Command staffing reports.
Yeah, CSRs.
Why they do that? Why they do away with that?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I personally think that the command staffing report was used as a tool by too many senior enlisted to hold the monitor hostage. So and the monitors were just getting too wrapped up in having debates with folks, and they have a job to do. They got to manage an entire community. The 2600s are a little bit smaller than others. I mean, we're like 2600 strong, or maybe 3,000, somewhere in there.
Somebody asked me the other day. I didn't know the answer off the top of my head.
Total numbers?
Yep.
Yeah, we're somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000, from what I understand. That's usually where we hover. But they got to manage that entire population. They got to manage T2P2, those that are in school, those that are in training, those that are in freaking medical status. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that they got to look at. They don't have time to argue with Master Gunny Ransom on where he thinks such and such should go. So you're absolutely right. I mean, if you approach it if you have a logical argument and you hey, I got a staff sergeant, we got this new structure out at the MEF. It's going to work for Master Sergeant Castro, and I think that the needs of the institution, the needs of the community, the needs of the individual all line up with this particular staff sergeant going out there. I mean, that's a solid argument, and that's definitely something I would encourage you to do. But just know it's not really rudder steerage, but you need to understand that they're looking at it through a much wider lens. So you might be looking at this one staff sergeant, but they're looking at 12 other staff sergeants. Right. And they know everybody's story. So
I have currently...
You need to manage your expectations.
Right. So I currently have the benefit of being able to also lean on the national defense strategy, the MOC and the FOE, and the fact that we pivoted to the Pacific.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's going to play in your advantage for getting some manpower. Yeah, the pivot to the Pacific. Absolutely. Yeah.
Pacing, threat, and all those other key terms.
Needs of the institution.
Right.
A friend of mine just got back from, she's a CI humaner.
Okay.
And she worked for the Army for a number of years, and now she's a civilian polygrapher. But they sent her to this course where they learned about CI human and the threat, really. And the Chinese apparently are very interested in Marine Corps TTPs. Imagine that.
Yeah.
We're doing this big pivot to the Pacific, and all of a sudden the Chinese CI folks are interested in our TTPs and our order of battle and things like that. So probably want to know, are we really doing the pivot? And so all that stuff obviously is publicly available information. But at the same time, Marines need to understand that this isn't a game.
This is not a game.
There's real actors out there that are watching you.
Yeah.
And knowing, and you're probably on somebody's list, especially if you're in our business, where they're watching and they're monitoring and they want to know, what are you doing? And what's the strategy here? And why are you doing it this way? And, are you really pivoting? Is the United States really focusing on China now and not focusing on other threats? That sort of thing. So it's a legitimate business that we're in, and it's serious. But when Marines engage enlisted assignments, they truly need to take in that the needs of the institution really are important. It's not just, I really want to go to Okinawa, or, my MOS could really use a staff sergeant out there. No. What do you bring to the fight? right? Because the national objectives and all those documents that you stated, those are real things. They really exist. And if you can't bring something to the fight, then you got no business lobbying for yourself. If you know there's another staff sergeant out there, or another gunny, or another master sergeant that could better, equip that particular AO, then you need to advocate for them and be able to explain why. So you really need to be unselfish, and I'm a firm believer that the higher you get in rank, the more unselfish you need to be, because it really isn't about you.
Right.
It truly is not. It's a bigger picture out there. There is a real threat out there, and they want to do us harm. And if you're not the best person for the job, then I'm sorry, you need to go play JV somewhere else. That's just the way that it is. Or step up to the plate, and learn and bring something to the table. But
So speaking of learning, where do you get your information from?
So depends. What information?
How do you stay current?
Oh, how do I stay current? Well, a number of things. One, I'm nosy. I try to be. And I think John Tiffany will probably tell you this too. I am not the best singer out there. I'm not.
He admitted the same thing.
Yeah, and I know. We're old, and I say that because being relevant and being old it's difficult, and not because we don't have the ability to, or our brains don't work that way. It's just that we have so much. Like Steve Berry used to say this all the time. I've forgotten more SIGINT than a lot of the guys know today. You know what I mean? So like when we came in, cell phones didn't exist. Internet was not a thing. You know what I mean? So like
well, cell phones did exist, but they was in briefcases.
They were in the blocks. Yeah, the brick cell phones. Yeah. You didn't have the handheld cell phones. I mean, none of that stuff was a thing. And so as that technology came online, a lot of staying relevant and getting information really depended on, some of it was luck. Like you just happened to be in a billet or in a unit that was going after that, But if you were working SSO in Siberia somewhere, then you were just out of luck, or
Right.
you're on an SDA, or like I spent 3 years at the Q Squadron. I was at the Q Squadron during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We were sitting in Prince Sultan Air Base, on the tarmac. I'm sitting in a Turkey's van, and the freaking integrated air defense system network was wiped out in 3 weeks. So our whole mission was to target radars and associated SAM systems. Well, that didn't exist after 3 weeks into that war. So now what? So I'm sitting in the Q Squadron in search of a mission. Meanwhile, on my peer group is with Raider Battalion with Task Force Tarawa pushing up to Baghdad. So some of it's just luck, in terms of staying relevant. So you got to be nosy. You got to research. And so that's one way, being nosy and researching. Another way is you have to participate. You got to participate. And I'm very fortunate being in the NCR. Now, being in my position, it makes it difficult to participate because for all intents and purposes, I'm an 89-99. I'm a battalion senior enlisted, and a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
I am Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer's senior enlisted. I'm his sergeant major. I am. That's what I am. Vince Quinteros is his operations chief. I am not the battalion operations chief. I am the battalion senior enlisted. So being relevant to our community is very difficult and challenging because my plate is full of sergeant major stuff. It is. But even with that said, there are venues where I can stay relevant, like the operational advisory groups. Those are awesome. The community of practices, with Mary Rangel down at I Department. And she's very good about sending that out. Before her was Sarah Clark. Major Passarella, who's does the SIGINT down there, Chief Washington Bush. So going to these different vignettes and like these different venues, I should say, like where OAGs take place, the message just came out for the spring OAG that's going on at
I
MCA.
didn't see that.
Just came out. So the spring OAG is April 1st through April 4th, and it's going to be at MCI. Unfortunately, I'm going to be on travel because I'm going to be visiting our substations out in Asia at that time. But you got to go to these things, and if you don't go,
Man,
you got to get the notes from it and review them.
So an adage that I've come to adopt and internalize wholeheartedly is, if you're not at the table, your ass is on the menu.
That's true. That is a fact. You have to be present. You have to be present. You got to be nosy. You got to be present.
But my problem is I'm constantly having to beg, borrow, and steal for travel dollars. It costs to fly from.
Oh yeah, I mean you're out in Okinawa, so it's difficult for you guys to get in.
You're telling me.
You're the 3MF G2. He's at every OAG.
Well, he is, and his chief is.
Yeah, his chief is there.
But to ask for a third.
This is where my beef lies. The chief is an 0291.
That he is.
They always go. Every OAG I have been at, I have never seen an 0291 chief from any MEF that has not been present. They're always there. The 2691s, it's a crapshoot. Sometimes they go. We as a community need to make it a priority to have a seat at the table.
You're gonna start a fight in Okinawa.
Hey, I'm just, if we want to be relevant,
right,
and if we want to be knowledgeable about the McKisery, and everything that entails, we have to have a seat at the table. You have to, and if you don't, then we're always going to be behind the green curtain, and we're going to know a lot of cool things, and we're going to have some noble efforts, but we're not going to get. My CEO always talks about two things that you need to learn as you get older in the ranks: proponency and advocacy.
Explain the two.
Okay, so being a proponent, whatever your agenda item is, you got to be a proponent of that. And the only way to get proponency is you got to have a seat at the table. You can't be a proponent of something if you're behind the green curtain. Okay, so you have to be out there constantly voicing your concern, whatever it is. If it's 12th Marines and being conscientious of their signature footprint, then you got to be out there and saying, hey, 12th Marines is very concerned about this. To be seen is to be heard is to be targeted. You got to be constantly being a proponent of whatever that agenda item is. Because if you're not, nobody knows.
Right.
They're going to be talking about other stuff, right? Being an advocate, you got to find somebody that carries a bigger stick and that has more of an influence than you do, that will advocate for you.
Executive championship.
That's right. You got to get somebody out there has to be doing that for you, because if you don't have proponency and advocacy, you're just spinning your wheels. You're marking time. I mean, I can think of a lot of 2600s, 2691s, and officers that had great ideas. They did. They're brilliant, intelligent. They didn't have proponency. They didn't have advocacy, so it died on the vine.
So what you're talking about, what you're getting at, is the ability to influence the human terrain.
Yep. And O2s are good at it.
Oh yeah. So I said this today.
We suck at it.
One of your sergeants by the name of Eric Moreno. He's He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Spent a lot of time with him on the mats in Okinawa. He did 2 pumps to the rock as part of the Det 5.
Mm-hmm.
And we've stayed in contact. He asked me to pin him to sergeant, and when he was out there in Oki. But like I explained to him, there's a lot of human that goes on in SIGINT.
Mm-hmm. You're right. No, you're right.
And although you're not formally trained, you're expected to be proficient at it.
You are. And that's the only way to stay relevant.
Yeah.
From your original question, you got to have a seat at the table, and you got to understand what proponency and advocacy is. I tell you, I didn't know what an OAG was until I got to headquarters MCSB.
Really?
I'd never been to one.
I know what they are. I've never been to one.
See?
I know that I'm missing out. I've never been to one.
I shouldn't say, I knew what they were, but I had never been to one. I mean, I knew there was this thing out there called an OAG where all the intel people from around the community get together and they have an operational advisory group, but I had never actually experienced, what all goes on there. There's a lot of stuff that's discussed at the OAG, and it's chaired by the director of Marine Corps Intelligence. So if it's not on his radar screen, then it ain't happening. It might be happening in your little neck of the woods, but it ain't happening on a larger scale, right? You need resources. That's another thing. In order to stay relevant, you got to understand how the acquisitions process works.
Yeah.
You got it. And that's why we need master gunnery sergeants at MGySgt and MarCorps Syscom. Because that's where all that happens. Especially at MarCorps Syscom. Now, I know Chuck Gutenson, he's the MarCorps Syscom 2691, and I'm sure he's kicking ass and taking names. But as a master sergeant, I just don't know how far he gets. Hopefully he's doing great things. He's a great guy, very smart.
Yeah.
Got his bachelor's degree, and I mean, he's a people person.
We were there together at DLI, and as well as later on at Goodfellow Air Force Base as instructors for.
That's right. He was an instructor out there.
So yeah, he's sharp.
He's a sharp cat.
He didn't pull any punches either.
No, he's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
But he's a master sergeant.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're at an organization like MarCorps Syscom, it really helps to be an E9. It helps. I'm not saying it's required. I'm saying it helps. When you're at an organization like MGySgt, it helps to be an E9. I mean, Sarah Clark is there now, and thankfully she knows her shit, and she's a pistol, good, bad, or indifferent. She's a pistol.
Yes, she is.
But she's a master guns.
So I haven't released her episode yet, but there were some things I had to dial back on her.
Oh yeah, she's a pistol. I had one conversation with Sarah Clark when I was at I Department on a visit, and I knew right away. I was like, oh, she's a pistol. She's a pistol. But we got to have people like that in our community. You got to have that in order to get a seat at the table. Otherwise, we're going to remain behind the green curtain.
Right.
We're going to be irrelevant, and the rest of the intel, McKisry, is going to continue to move forward, and SIGINT is not going to get a voice. And that's what we need.
So, how do you envision us in terms of coming to a solid understanding as a community of the differences in which we place upon the shoulders of that team leader for that EWST, and that team leader for that SST? Because my point to General Donahue was, we're doing the same fucking thing. In a lot of ways, there's very little difference. Mm-hmm. All we're talking about right now is command relationships with the support team.
Right.
But it seems to me that we're having to we're confusing the matter unnecessarily for that team leader. Mm-hmm. At a certain point in time, he's going to be an SSTTL. Mm-hmm. He's got that hat on. Another point in time, hey, you know what? I'm in direct support.
I'm an EWST.
EWST.
Yeah. That's a good question. Truth be told, I think the whole adage words mean things really applies to this particular situation. EW, the way I understand it, and I don't know a whole lot about it, to be honest with you, but, just being nosy and going to OAGs and listening to people talk, the way I understand it is that the term EWST came up in order to be able to work more closely with the combat arms units because of authorities and rules, that we have to abide by. So if you say SST, then you use the term SIGINT. And when you use the term SIGINT, you put a bunch of restrictions on what you can and cannot do.
Right.
But when you say EW, it's almost like a loophole.
Game on.
Right. Now, all of a sudden, like, for example, when we were in Afghanistan in 2000, when I was with 1st Rated Battalion in Afghanistan at Leatherneck, and under Lieutenant Colonel Perry at the time, now Colonel Perry, great guy, great commander, just awesome CO. This was 10.1 and 10.2. The Wolfhounds were a thing. And the infantry battalions wanted their O3s to pack Wolfhounds. And they were literally like, hey, you need to give us these Wolfhounds because we need to know where the enemy is. And yada, yada, yada. And we were like, whoa. Well, we cannot delegate SIGINT assets to an infantry battalion. You guys don't have the clearances. You don't have the authorities. You don't have... There's all kinds of stuff wrong with this. And I'm telling you this story because I think this is where the term EWST was born. I really do. And then somebody said, wait a minute. They're not doing SIGINT. They're doing EW. We can do it if we call it EW. Fast forward a couple years, and all of a sudden we got EWSTs. And look how they're being employed. So sometimes I think as SIGINTers, being behind the green curtain, so to speak, we're our worst enemies. But those rules and those authorities are in place for a reason.
Definitely.
Right? So we just have to be very cautious, to get at your question, and very careful how we move forward and make sure that, the reason why those rules are in place, that we're not breaching that. Because if we do, then people are going to get, hurt, in trouble, or worse yet, killed, because we were in such a damn hurry to get this capability to where it needed to be. So I always need to move forward, but we need to move forward with caution and understand why those authorities are in place, so we don't mess it up. No, it doesn't really get after the question, but that's just my understanding of why you have SSTs, EWSTs, and why they're calling them different
I kind of understood it. There was another layer there where it was a sleight of hand to grab structure from the infantry.
Yeah, that is another layer. And it's almost like a compromise.
It
right?
is. It is. That we ended up being the beneficiary of.
True.
From to a certain extent. But
let me tell you a story real quick. So I was at the Cornerstone course. That's the course that all the E9s, senior enlisted, and the battalion commanders and 06 level commanders go to. And part of that's an awesome course, by the way.
Yeah, I was supporting the capstone, the capstone course when I was at the embassy in Santo Domingo.
There you go. Okay,
yeah. Which is similar.
Similar,
yeah.
Yeah, they actually call it the capstone course. Cornerstone. I've heard it called many things, but these are all future commanders. There's like 300 to 400 of us in the room down at Alfred Gray Center at Quantico. One of the culminating speakers, you hear from all the DCIs, all the deputy commandants, DCs, I should say. DCI is us, but all the deputy commandants, all the 3-stars, right? MNRA comes and speaks. The INL, the logistics guy comes and speaks. All of them, they come and talk to us. At the very end, Commandant of the Marine Corps comes, and he's talking to us. He's talking about different things, from his perspective on where he sees the Marine Corps, the vision he sees, and the different ways he wants his commanders to view things. And the one thing I do remember that he talked about was electronic warfare. He called these out by name.
Yeah.
Signals intelligence, information environment, and freaking called units out, and the radio battalions. Now, I know that probably 70 to 80% of the people in that room had no idea what he was talking about. But that was part of his 15-minute spiel when he talked to us. So I know it's important. And this was in 2017, right? So this definitely has made he created the MEF information groups. 2691 structure at the MEF information group. They're not SIG NEW chiefs. They're IO chiefs. So it's interesting to see the evolution of our OC field. And I think it's important that we embrace it and that we seize the opportunity while we have it. But at the same time, we don't lose sight of the importance of SIGINT, because SIGINT is a force multiplier.
Right.
But we have an opportunity to propel SIGINT into a different domain, so to speak, where at first I think we were very resistant. A lot of folks were, especially when you throw cyber in there.
Right.
They were very resistant, but it's coming. And there's a new breed of SIGINT out there that's coming. And, you got visionaries like freaking Sam Carter, and some of these other very, very smart folks that are probably too smart for any of us. And they're dropping knowledge and they're like, I can't handle all this. But they need to learn how to, because this is the future.
So I think I was probably one of the only 2691s that was there at the data summit when the 59s synced up. I was able to
nice
to jump in on that.
Nice.
Like I said, because that billet was gap.
Yep.
And I covered down on that for a hot minute, and I still kind of keep my fingers in that pie.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more so than Master Sergeant LaFarve probably liked, but I'm not gonna let Sam Carter down.
Good.
Because I what's that?
He's put a lot of work.
He's put a lot of work into this.
Yep.
Yep. So I went to go see him when I was during this trip while I was down in Quantico, and he was in a firefight on the phone, taking care of business. I was there to meet with Master Sergeant Mahoney to discuss the deployment of certain tools over to the O2XX community to kind of get us all on the same sheet of music from a data conditioning perspective, because we're not we're still stovepiped and siloed in the way in which we approach data management, which is inhibiting us from being able to have a legitimate common operating picture, common intelligence picture, and so I wasn't able to really talk to Sam, but afterwards he shot me a message. He's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, bro." I say, "Hey, you know what? I know you got a lot on your plate. You're a motherfucking data architect, master guns of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
I ain't taking shit personal. If you ain't got time to talk to me for right now, it's for a good reason."
Yeah.
But we ended up syncing up, and me, him, Scoggins, and John Stansel.
Oh yeah. I saw him today.
A lot of brain power.
Yeah. Stansel's another smart guy.
Yeah.
And he was at Captain House's change of command today. He's at DCI.
Yeah. But to kind of sit there and listen to some of the things that they're working through, there's no rest.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on. I mean, to get at your original question, how do you stay relevant? You know, you attend these forums. You keep your you got to stay nosy, and you got to be responsive too. So, you know, department will send out Mary Rangel. She'll send out emails. You know.
Yeah.
About the cops, the SIGINT cops.
Yep.
So you gotta be responsive to those, even if you're not actually hitting reply and writing anything. Read it.
Right.
You know, just read it. You know, a lot of people are like, I'm not saying anything because I don't want to be the stupid guy in the room, right. So I'm not going to say anything. Fine, don't say anything, but read what other people are saying.
So here's what I did. My first day in town. I jumped on the metro and I went up to visit I department, and I sat down with Mary Rangel and we worked on the 2 or 3 things that were most pressing for her, and I provided her in the way that I can input from the OPFOR out in Indo-PACOM.
Good. She needs that.
Yeah,
that's good.
You know, and I kind of because she was working on an information paper for DCI, and there was an email chain that had generated off of that. A lot of input, but you know, when I asked her about it, she's like they're talking about all these things and none of it's exactly what was the original question. I said, you know, so let's dial it back. What was the original question? And let's get at that. And if you got extraneous information, not saying delete it, but let's set it to the side for now.
Yeah.
And my other piece to her, and I understand that she's coming in and she's now having to fill Sarah Clark's shoes.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a big shoes to fill.
Right?
Yep.
Because Sarah was kind of perfect for that position. And so I told her, I said, look, this is just Sammy Castro talking. Identify who your trusted circle is of SMEs, confidants, mentors, however you want to view it. Whatever that circle is, go to them first. Work on, chew on, rough sketch out what it is that you're trying to get through, you know, the ringer. And then at that point in time, once you get it to about 85, 90% solution, then push it out for the peanut gallery. Because at that point in time, you're not obligated to defend it because you've already got buy-in from known quantities. And then at that point in time, they've got investment in that output. And you're not stuck having to hold it down on your own.
That's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then, you know, if you choose those individuals carefully, they're ready to roll. And they've already thought this through. They're in billets. Ideally, they're in billets where they've got more experience currently than the majority of the rest of the occ field, or they're just the type of individuals that have that information, right? They've already established themselves. So not that they're infallible, but they've thought it through. They've thought it through together, and they've kind of worked through those kinks. And so when somebody comes up with that 1,000-yard sniper shot, which, you know, we got a lot of good snipers.
A lot of snipers.
We got a lot of snipers in the occ field.
Yep.
You'll have, you know, supporting fires to be able to negate that.
Yep. No, I think that's wise. It's definitely prudent to do. The key there is who you pick, right?
So if you were Mary Rangel's shoes, who would you pick?
Sarah Clark would definitely be one. And depending on, you know, what her focus is, I definitely would rope in the Ready Battalion Ops Chiefs, because you have to have that tactical perspective. Because let's face it, they're on the ground.
Yeah.
right? They're there. So I wouldn't leave any of them out. You know, I'd go with Loretta Sonobin. She brings a certain flavor to the fight. You know, Shepard, sure, he's new, but he's out there. He's the one in the seat. And of course, Sean DeCow, who's a 50-pound brain, and has a lot of MARSOC experience as well, and just a lot of good knowledge. She definitely needs to get their advocacy, right, and proponency. It would always be good to get an MCSB perspective because that's their strategic perspective.
Right.
So whether it's myself or Vince Quinteros, I'm more of an 89-99, I will admit, but I do know some things and I know some people, so that helps.
Right.
And then you never want to leave out the special ops community, right? So who's ever sitting at MARSOC, I know today it's, name just escapes me. It's the one that Sean DeCow is going to go replace. But, you know, you can go to former MARSOC guys, the guy that, the one that's down in Goodfellow now. He spent a lot of years in
Cornette.
MARSOC.
Yeah, nuts.
Kyle Cornette, yeah. He's got a lot of experience at MARSOC. And speaking of the schoolhouse, you need to bring in the schoolhouse too, because they're training the next generation of Chiganers, right? So I guess in the end, you want to definitely bring in a good cross section of Radio Battalion, NSA, Schoolhouse, MARSOC, and don't forget your MEFs, right? I really can't speak to the divisions because that's a new thing.
Yeah, it is.
I really don't understand the cog in the wheel that they play, but the MEFs, you like guys like yourself, right? And whoever's going to be at first MEF and 2 MEF. Well, 2 MEF, it was Mike Smith, right? Well, no, he was the G2 chief.
Yeah, so
he wasn't the SIG NEW chief. Buckland, yeah. But I mean, that's kind of a wide swath, but it's wide on purpose because it kind of speaks at the heart of what you were saying. Once you get buy-in from key players at all levels, whether it's at school, NSA, Radio Battalion, the MEF, I mean, once everybody's singing the same song, it's really hard to snipe that.
Right.
It really is. And I'll give you a great example. So I love Jeremy Doucet. I do. Man, he's a wild man.
But
I love him. But we have a difference of opinion about who should sit at the senior enlisted position for MCSB. Should it be a sergeant major or should it be a master gunnery sergeant, 2691? All right, so this debate comes up. And what I'm told from previous battalion senior enlisteds, it comes up every time a new senior enlisted comes in the seat, right? And usually the argument is that if you have a sergeant major, then you have somebody who's administratively savvy and he understands things like ADCEPs and NJPs and all these things that quite honestly aren't that difficult. They aren't. A master gunnery sergeant in any MOS can do those things, right? There's a learning curve, but once you learn them and once you get it, correspondence and naval letter format and all that stuff, once you get it and you understand it and you understand how the chain of command works for MCSB, you can be cooking with Crisco. Jeremy Doucet's thing is just have a sergeant major come in and do it. You don't have to worry about it because as a master gunner sergeant, you're a SIG NEW chief. You need to focus on SIG NEW things. I'm like, look, Jeremy, what you're not understanding is that if a sergeant major comes and sits in my seat, first of all, you have an access issue. Because not all sergeants major have TSSI clearances. As a matter of fact, the majority of them do not. So he's going to be sitting outside the fence line as a battalion sergeant major for a good amount of time. So there's that. Once he gets into the building and he sits in the seat, you're going to have a very steep learning curve on what 90% of the bodies within his battalion do. And that's support to NSA.
Right.
He has no idea. He could come from being a motor T guy. He could come from being an infantry guy. He could be an avionics guy. He could be a freaking logistician. You don't know what he is.
Right, because ultimately it's only at the battalion level.
He has no idea.
He might be a boot sergeant major for all intents and purposes.
More than likely, he will be a boot sergeant major, because the battalion level sergeants major are boot sergeants major, because that's the 05 command.
Right.
So he probably is a frock sergeant major. So Jeremy, think about this. You put a frock sergeant major in my position, he can be lost. When he goes and does his first walkabout in NSA spaces, if he has access, and those Marines start talking about the stuff that they're doing, he has no idea what that means. I barely have an idea of what that means. And I'm a Master Guns 2691. Now, God, I'm not the greatest singer out there, but, databases change. Everything changes. And it's not
constantly changing.
Constantly. And so it's hard. You talk about relevancy. It's hard to stay relevant as a Master Gun 2691. It's not easy. It's a great question, and it needs to be explored, and people need to understand, what the science and art of that is. But as a sergeant major, by the way, your hire is MCIA. So you have to understand the world of the sergeant major. Sergeants major are all about echelons of command. So what is the MCSB sergeant major going to go do after he's the MCSB sergeant major? Who's reporting to MCIA, who's run by a master gunnery sergeant?
Well, so then it's easy. We change that to a sergeant major too.
Yeah. Are we just going to... And there's this piece. Don't forget about this. The E9 community is structured at a certain percentage of the Marine Corps. Congressionally mandated that they cannot go above 1 point, I think it's 1.5%. Might be wrong on that, but I think it's 1.5%. So I think currently E9s in the Marine Corps at like 0.9% or 0.8%. So we have not broken that threshold. They're not allowed to. You're not allowed, because in order to maintain that pyramid structure of enlisted force, you can only have a certain percentage at the top, right? So you replace the master gunnery sergeant with a sergeant major, we just lost structure. Because they're not going to give us another master guns. They're going to be like, oh, you don't want that E9 to be a master guns? You want it to be a sergeant major? Oh, okay, 2691s. You just lost the master guns, because we're replacing that billet with an 8999, and we're not giving you, it's not a 1-for-1 swap.
Right.
So these are just things that I don't think Jeremy fully understands. He's a smart cat. He's smart. And I love Jeremy, but we just violently disagree on this point. And it was funny because I brought all that up because you talk about getting your circle of, advocates and then pushing it out. Well, Jeremy called me up and he's like, hey, Leon, I really need to pursue this 8999 position at MCSP. And I had a sergeant major when I was in Quantico at Mark Corps Syscom recently come out to Hawaii, and he said, oh, you want to do a TO change for that position? A sergeant major, by the way, right? All you got to do is just submit it to this guy. I got an officer, a major that works at MNRA, and we'll make this happen. So Jeremy, his infinite wisdom, fires off an email, right, to me, and he was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And I said, hey, brother, how about you do this? Put your thoughts together, push it out to the community. See what they say. Well, he pushed it out to the community. He probably had about 2 or 3 folks that were on his side, but everybody else lambasted him. I mean, it was a slaughter. And then I forwarded it to previous battalion senior enlisted guys like Gecko And some of these guys that have sat in my seat, and they just freaking piled it on. And poor Jeremy, he stopped after that. But it goes back to your point. You gotta socialize the issue before you push it out. And you gotta socialize it with a trusted group of core individuals, whatever that issue is. It doesn't have to be the senior enlisted of MCSB, whatever it is. And then make sure that you have, buy-in by them. And then when you push it out, you have a firm foundation for an argument. But yeah, that was an interesting little bit of drama that happened recently within MCSB.
So let me ask you, what does Leon Ransom do to kind of balance out between your professional requirements, which can sometimes be daunting, and your personal obligations in terms of being a father, head of household?
That's a great question. I don't know that I do it great. As a matter of fact, I probably do it more wrong than right. I think the first thing that I do is I try to stay physically fit. Now here I am coughing, but that's something else. I think that folks, especially in our community, underestimate the value of being physically fit at the later years in our career.
I would agree with that.
Say again?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because physical fitness really does enable you to be at the top of your game mentally, in every kind of aspect of your job. So I make it a point to remain physically fit. Secondly, in order to balance professional and personal, I rely heavy on friends and family. This job requires me to travel about 1/3 out of the year combined. I'm gone 1/3 of the year. I'm a single dad. I got 3 teenagers at home. And as you know, being a teenager, being a father of a teenager, it requires a lot of parenting, way more than when they were little for me. So, and then being in the environment, I mean, my kids go to Meade High School in MacArthur Middle. That's like the East Side High of Maryland, if you will. If you remember from Lean on Me, I mean, it's a tough school. And they go there and they're involved, and I'm gone. I got a dog, a big dog. I don't got a little poodle dog. I got a big dog, so I got a lot of stuff going on at home, and there's no way I could possibly manage any of that if I didn't have. I have Marines that will stay at my house and watch my kids. I have a sergeant who used to be the admin clerk for our battalion. She stayed at my house multiple times and watched my kids. Former Marines that live in the area. So I rely heavy on friends. My mom has flown out. Last year, 2017, we were in Afghanistan visiting Marines that were deployed from our battalion. We were gone for like about 2 weeks. My mom came out, took time off, and stayed with the kids. So I rely heavy on friends, family, Marines, to help me just be present with my family. But when I am home and I balance it, I make a concerted effort, and it's not always done right, but I make a concerted effort to be involved with my kids. So I am known at MacArthur Middle School. Like I will go to MacArthur Middle School and be loud. They know, oh, Mr. Ransom. They know me by name, by sight, right? They see me like, oh, Mr. Ransom's here. I'm like, I'm here.
You call Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I got an email. My kid was being disruptive. He had silly putty in the classroom. Where's he at? And they'd be like, oh, he's in classroom such and such. Let me get your little sticker. Put your sticker on your uniform, and I'll walk up there and I'll sit in the back of the classroom. I do that all the time. parent-teacher conferences, I'm at them.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be involved. You got to be involved, and
especially with the teenagers.
Oh my gosh, it's an absolute. So I stay involved. I wish I could. My daughter plays basketball. I wish I could coach her, but I'm not home enough to be a coach. But I go if I'm home, I'm at her game. I'm videotaping it. I'm active on social media, on Facebook. I post things on Facebook on what's going on with my kids. So I try to show the kids that I actually care about what's going on in their life. Even my son, who doesn't live with me, and I have another child. Actually, I had out of wedlock. After I got a divorce in 2000. Well, it started after the Afghanistan deployment, and then after the divorce was over, I was foolish, and I had a child, and he's 5 now, and I try to stay as active with him as possible. The relationship with his mother is estranged, but his name is actually Leon the third. So I have 5 kids, 4 with my ex-wife that I was married to for 11 years, and then I have the one after. And it's hard because going into the Marine Corps and going into my first marriage, that was it was not the plan, right? I was going to get married one time. I've been married twice. Thankfully, I didn't have any kids with the second wife. I was just going to have kids with one woman. I've had 5 kids with 2 women. And I didn't want my kids to grow up with mom in one state, dad in another state. Right? And that's happened. So it is very... it's very challenging, day to day, but you have to take it one day at a time. But I will tell you that, my life before the Marine Corps and my life throughout the Marine Corps has prepared me for this moment. So, people look at me all the time and they're like, I don't know how can you be a battalion senior enlisted, single dad, 3 teenagers at home, 2 other kids in another state, and then do your job effectively? Well, doing my job effectively is probably up for debate. I haven't gotten fired yet, so that's a good thing. But, and my kids choose to live with me. So that's saying something, right? The ones that are with me, they choose to live with me. I told my other son he needed to stay because he wanted to finish high school there, but the other 3, they chose me. They're teenagers. They can choose at that point.
Right.
So they chose to live with dad.
So my brother and I lived with my father after my parents divorced.
Is that right?
So, yeah, I understand that dynamic wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Not that my mom wasn't capable. It's just that I think Daniel and I both instinctively knew we needed to be close to Pops.
Yeah.
In order to become men.
Yep.
And that's how it played out.
Yeah.
I know it was hard for my mom. I don't regret it. But I mean that man busted his ass to put a roof over our head. He liked to hit the bar right after work with his buddies, have a couple of cold ones, but he was usually home in time to make dinner. Make sure, hey, you do your fucking homework, boy.
Yep.
Yes, sir. All right, you sure? You ain't fucking lying? Nope, it's all done. Good to go. He coached our baseball teams, and I mean, he was there in a way that it set the standard for the type of father that I would become later.
That's awesome.
So
that's encouraging. I'm glad you shared that, man, because I'm sure when he was going through it, he didn't know if he was being effective. Right?
Yeah.
Because I know I feel that way sometimes. So as a single dad.
So not having listened to the other episodes, you won't know this, but my father passed away unexpectedly at the age of 50 from an aneurysm.
Oh my gosh.
And it ripped me apart
I'm
Leon.
sure.
But I heard on a podcast once, years later, that the goal, as it pertains to personal and character development, is that you should be the most reliable person at your father's funeral. And the to make a long story short, I can honestly say that I was.
Awesome.
But you know, one of the things in the aftermath of that, Doug March made me go to. He didn't make me, but he highly suggested, encouraged me to go to grief counseling. And in the process of doing so, I was assigned some homework to write down what I identified as the most memorable or the most impactful characteristics that my father exhibited as it pertains to how he influenced me. And for one of the things that I saw was his selflessness and his willingness to help others. And then once I provided that list to the grief counselor, he asked me to go to other people who are as close to him as they are to me. And the question to ask them was, do you see those characteristics in me? And the encrypted message in there was that my father is still here in that which he taught me. And so, you know, like I said, it's informed my perspective on fatherhood, and in that I'm constantly trying to measure up. But before he passed, he told me the one thing that he wished he had done differently was that he was more affectionate. That he wished he'd have kissed me more, he'd have hugged me more. But you know, towards the end there,
he's got boys.
Yeah.
But, see, I got two girls.
Yeah, so you probably kiss and hug on them.
I try.
All the time. Yeah.
When they let me. But yeah, I hear what he's saying. Yeah, that's.
But you know, towards the end there, I mean, like we grown men. I remember kissing him. We both had mustaches, you know, and what that felt like, that prickliness and hugging him. And he told me before he passed, he says, you've exceeded me.
Wow.
And I didn't accept that because I know what he was. I knew who he was. I know how he was. I know how. I mean, just some of the instances that situations that we found ourselves in. Some of the stuff that I put him through, and how he managed that. Because he was 15 when my mom got pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
We grew up together.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know if I had that in me. Not at 15. But you know, I told him, I said, you know, especially when he said that he wished that he was more affectionate with me. I was like, you gave me everything that I needed to prepare me for the harshness and the cruelty and the indifference of this world, such that I could walk into a war fighting organization and from get go hold my own, and be competitive and you know, in this tribe where we are known to eat our young, survive, not only survive but thrive, and carve out a space where I can hold my head high. You know,
you attribute that to your father.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, that's awesome.
And your kids will recognize that. Your kids will recognize that. I'm sure that they already do.
I know my oldest. You know, the fact that he is choosing to go into the Marine Corps shocked the crap out of me, to be honest with you. So that says a lot, that he's choosing the profession that his dad. I mean, he's 1,200 plus SAT guy, honor student, physically fit, but he wants to be a Marine Corps officer. I'm like, awesome. Marine Corps needs good men like you. My daughters, having girls is different.
Yeah. I'm so glad I didn't have girls that had me wrapped around their fingers.
It's I didn't have any sisters growing up.
Okay.
And I was raised by a single mother, so my perspective on girls was, me chasing them until I had them, and then that just changed the game. I had a little boy who was in my house when I came home from work the other day. Man, I was seeing red. This little boy, 14, 15 years old. My 15-year-old daughter was in there. And I came home. I didn't know he was in the house because she had been home asleep. Not asleep, but sick. My whole house is fighting a bug right now. And so she had been home for this was her last day. She was home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I came home on Friday. It was last week. And I'm walking around the house and something just didn't feel right. And they have the whole downstairs, right? So I'm walking around. I look out the back window and I'm just kind of looking. I see this young punk walking through my backyard. Clearly walked out of my house, walking through my backyard and attempting to jump over the fence. And so it was that moment where you were like, did I really just see that? Yeah, I did just see that. So I went out the front to cut him off, man, and I lost my damn mind. I mean, I didn't put my hands on him. I wanted to, but I told him to sit down on my porch. I was screaming at him. I was yelling at him, and then I would try to talk calm. And then he got this attitude, right? The teenage attitude these days, and then that just would set me off, right? And then I was getting in his face, and he was on his phone. He was on his phone doing this, and I grabbed his phone out of his hand. He was like, "Don't grab my phone." And I said, "I'll rip your damn head off if I want to," right? And I was just going nuts.
Be careful, that's terroristic threats.
I know, right? I know. So I was pissed, man. I was so angry that this kid was in the house with my little girl. Well, she's 15. I mean, she's older than him. I said, "Look, you got one chance. One. And then after that, gloves come off. Where do you live? And what is your parents' names? I'm not telling you anything." I said, "You just blew it." I called the MPs. Because the kids on base, they can come from out in town. They bus kids in from out in town. And the neighborhoods that they bus them in from are off limits. Mead Village and Pioneer Place. Those are off limits areas for service personnel. So I didn't know if this kid was a Mead Village kid. I didn't know if he was a Pioneer Place. I didn't know. So he tries to tell me, "I'm not telling you anything." So I was like, all right. So I called the police. They rolled up 2 cars deep. And they were like, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know who this kid is. He won't tell me who he is." I got his phone. I caught him in my house when I came home. Long story short, his mother is a single parent, active duty soldier. He unfortunately lost his dad to an illness earlier this year or last year. Obviously going through a lot. He had only been in my house for 15 minutes, thankfully.
Right.
So and when they ended up questioning him, and then they were like, "You want to talk to him?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to talk to him." "How long were you in my house?" He said, "What time is it?" And I was like, and as soon as he asked me what time it was, I was like, I knew he hadn't been in there that long. I was like, "It's this time." And he was like, "Literally, maybe 15 minutes before you got home." I said, "What were you doing in my house?" He said, "We were watching TV. That's all we were doing. We were watching TV." I said, "Okay. What's your mother's name and what's her phone number? Here's the cop." "You can't ask him that." I said, "Oh, yes, I can. I will ask him that." "You don't think I can ask him that?" He says, I don't think you can be asking him things like that." And I said, "Hold on a minute." So I called the garrison command sergeant major, who lives across the street from me, because I live on E9 Road. Hey, Brian. Right. And he was like, oh, no, you can ask him that. Yeah. So I got his mother's phone number, called her up. Oh, she was pissed. Apparently he had 2 younger sisters, and she was like, that's disrespectful. And, ooh, wait till he gets home. And I was like, all this and that, right? And I said, okay, I just want you to know, though, I was a 14-year-old little boy once.
Mm.
And
definitely.
I did not have sisters. I was chasing girls just like him. My girls are cute. They're like black, white, Filipino, and Mexican. So they're beautiful girls, right? They got all the flavors going on. So I know they're cute. And I was a 14-year-old little boy, but they're my girls, and that's my house. And he's not involved. He's not allowed in my house unless I invite him. Because the cop was like, well, she invited him, he can come over. I said, no. If I invite him, he can come over. And she was like, oh, no, I agree. She said, I wish you would have whooped his little ass. And I was like, Mom, come on now. Come on. He's a 14-year-old boy. He's hurting. Well, that's not an excuse. I know, but he's hurting. He lost his dad. He's hurting. So my passion, I say all that to say this. My passion actually is, I've had another staff sergeant come up to me and say, she's a single parent too. She's in our unit. She's like, Master Guns, I'm really having a hard time with my son. He's a 9th grader. Will you help? And so when it happens once, I'm like, all right, but twice, okay, now I got a responsibility. So I got a passion for helping young teenage boys that don't have dads. I was a young teenage boy that grew up without a dad. Mm. If it wasn't for coaches of athletic teams, if it wasn't for teachers or just males in the neighborhood, who knows where I would have been. So that's my responsibility. So
they need that.
They need it.
They need that.
They crave it.
Yeah. I had no shortage of positive male role models in my life growing up. My dad had 3 brothers that were always there. I had my grandfather, my dad's dad.
Yeah.
I had, on my dad's side, I had 2 great grandfathers that were there for me up until I maybe 11, 12 years old before they passed away. No, it was later than that. I must have been about 14 or 15 before they both passed away.
Wow.
And I had great grandfathers, and I had a lot of personal one-on-one interaction with both of them. That's probably awesome. More so than the rest of my generation of Castros. And on top of that, I had community leaders with LULAC, which is it's a Hispanic rights group, civil rights group, but it was really started by Hispanic veterans from World War II era.
Okay.
That were involved in my character development and leadership development. Mm-hmm. Boys Club. Mm-hmm. I spent plenty of time there. It's where I learned to box. It's where I learned to play chess. It's where I learned to play pool. Mm-hmm. It's where I learned to pitch pennies, roll dice. I mean, all of that.
Yeah, Boys Club. Yeah.
And then on top of that, I did Cub Scouts up to a certain point. But I mean, I had a no shortage, like I said, of positive male role models that took a vested interest in me as an individual.
Mm-hmm. So important. It's critical, and I see that as a responsibility that I have. Being in the position that I'm in, I don't brag about the position, but I definitely want to use it to help people. And if I got a staff NCO that comes up to me and says, "Hey, Master Guns, I think she's coming over tomorrow, actually, and bringing her son. He likes dogs. I got a dog. Say he can come hang out with me. I got no problems with that." This Army staff sergeant whose son, has a crush on my daughter, clearly, okay, he can come hang out, but I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Really?" She was just shocked. She was like, "Really? You would invite him back over?" I said, "Yeah." I'll buy back over, but I'm gonna be there. And then she was like, whatever, I forgot his name, but it starts with a D. She's like, hey, and she's calling, Mr. Leon said that you can come back over. But this could be a really good thing for you. So hopefully I hear back from her. But yeah, that's awesome. I mean, young boys, they need that. Young girls need positive female role models.
Yeah.
And then girls need positive male role models in their life too.
Most definitely.
Right? Because I have been learning, hopefully this is the case, but I have been learning that the type of male that you model for your daughters is generally the type of male that she will end up with, because that's what she has grown accustomed to, right? And then same on the side for mothers and their sons. The type of mom that you are for your son,
right,
will be the type of, usually, not always, but the odds are leaning in that way. So I have a passion for youth. Like I said, I grew up with a single mother. My mother is white, blonde hair, blue eyes, Danish descent. My dad is midnight black. And I grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, where the percentage of white folks in Oregon is like 93+% when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. The whole state of Oregon was actually a state that was established by white people because they didn't want to be in the South, but they wanted a state up north that didn't have blacks or Mexicans or anybody. So the most of the state's white. There's a bunch of Scandinavians up there, man. Blonde hair, blue-eyed types. My mom was one of them. So the dynamics of Portland have changed a lot since then. Portland's all about keeping it weird now. It's like Austin, Texas. It's all, But back then...
I love the vibe of Austin.
That's the way it was. Now it's different.
Yeah.
But back then, that's the way it was. So when I grew up, it was tough, man. It was tough because I had a little bit of an identity crisis going on. I was in a high school that was about 1,600 strong, one black male. That was me. And I'm half. So, it was weird.
Right.
It was weird. And things like boys club, we had boys club, YMCA, that kind of stuff. Coaches. I was pretty athletic in high school, so I played a lot of sports, and so coaches played a big role, teachers, other friends, dads who recognized my situation and had a heart would step in.
Yeah.
Usually it was minority friends, dads, but occasionally my best friend, blonde hair, blue-eyed kid, his dad was like a second dad to me. So, yeah.
But as you were telling that piece, it reminded me that my father would take in strays.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
I had guys that would come over to the house and they'd stay, especially during the summertime, or maybe spring break, 3-4 nights in a row.
Yep.
And then others, as they got older, after my parents divorced, because my mom probably, I don't know if she would handle that.
Yeah.
But my dad, after my parents divorced, my dad took in several of my friends that stayed with us pretty much indefinitely, with the understanding that they had to go to school.
Yeah.
They had to keep the grades up.
Yeah.
They had to get a fucking job.
Mm.
He snatched up half their paycheck and put it in a savings account for them.
Really? What a man. Wow.
But they didn't get that back until after they left.
Wow.
And
wow, that's amazing.
But both of them are currently incarcerated.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's too bad.
Yeah. So, I mean,
He tried.
He tried. He made an honest effort. And I will tell you that both of them set the standard for manhood at my father.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And not their own.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
He was quite a guy.
And he was a character. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one time, I don't think I've told this story on the podcast before. I was my dad had ears like me. And
I was noticing your ears.
Yeah.
When you wear a hat, it really makes it stand out.
Yeah. So growing up, large extended family, there was my dad was known for being a scrapper. And the first thing to get him started scrapping was
someone talking about his ears.
fuck with him about his ears. And I inherited that characteristic. But as a kid, we were at a family party, not too far from our own house. And after, the crowd had a few, one of my dad's cousins started ribbing my father about some of the childhood antics and his nicknames. And so my dad got back at him verbally, in much the same fashion, but his cousin wasn't willing to just let it go. And when my dad's back was turned, he came up from behind him and hit him. And my dad's brother was there, my uncle Gib, and my uncle Gibby and my dad were really tight. My Uncle Gibby was my dad's younger brother, and my dad took care of my Uncle Gibby. And you just wasn't gonna hit my father, and my Uncle Gibby was just gonna sit there and watch it. That's just not how this is gonna play out. And so before you know it, they were rolling on the ground and they were putting a hurting on my dad's cousin. After it was all said and done, my dad, it kind of fizzled out, but my dad looked at me. He's like, "Hey, what happened with you? Man hit me from behind. Where were you?" You know what my answer was, Leon? I got your beer. At that young age, I must have been about like maybe 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
But the first thing I went to do was to grab my dad's beer. Like, I don't want no part of that. I'm not going to be useful in that equation. Yeah. But this I can handle, right? He never forgot this story, neither did I. But let me ask you, and I asked this question, not of all the guests, but for quite a few. If I had the ability to fold time and space and to take you back to a point in time, maybe you are on deployment as a sergeant, and to give you about maybe 2 hours to sit down with Sergeant Ransom and just kind of give him some words of wisdom, some advice to prepare him for the road ahead, what would you tell him?
Wow. That's a really good question. The thing that keeps coming into my mind is prioritize your family above all things. There's nothing more important than your wife, followed by your kids. And, that's the biggest regret that I have. So that would be the biggest piece of advice that I would want to instill in Sergeant Ransom. Because Sergeant Ransom got married as a sergeant, obviously. And I remember it being a very happy day. I remember it being a very blissful part of my life. I was 24 years old, stationed in Hawaii. Things were good. Church wedding, and it was just good. And you know, I tell Marines this all the time. The Marine Corps is not conducive to family life. You need to understand that. The sooner you understand that, the better off you will be. So if I had a chance to sit down with Sergeant Ransom for 2 hours, I would beat into his head just how important and how much of a priority you need to make your family. And it needs to be in that order: wife, then kids. So part of the problem with being raised from a single parent home, in my opinion, is you want to give your kids everything that you did not have. I think every parent wants to do that, but especially if you were raised as a single parent because you didn't have a mom and a dad in the home. So when you do, your perspective on the role of a mom and a dad is skewed a little bit. And if I could just talk to Sergeant Ransom, I would talk to him about, the importance of your family, the importance of, loving your wife, the importance of making sure that that your priorities are in order, the importance of knowing your role as a man in the home and understanding the role of your wife in your home. Just understanding that, because I'll tell you, Sammy, the one thing that I think that we are missing as a society, as a generation, is that we don't understand that family is the basis of all things. Once you have a breakdown of the family, you have a breakdown of society. And the divorce rate in the military, some will say it's above 70%. Seven out of 10 marriages end in divorce. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but that's what I heard when I went through my divorce. That's what, it was a life-changing event, obviously, in a number of ways.
Right.
But 70%. So when you have the breakdown of military families, you have the breakdown of military readiness. And that's a national security issue. It really is. When you have families that are just being destroyed by whatever, it doesn't matter what the reason is, but the family is breaking down, that individual service member is not at 100%. And I see it more so from my perspective as a battalion senior enlisted than I've ever seen it before. Because I see all of it. I see all the domestics. I see all of the blotter reports. I see all of the Marines that come in and out of my office talking about, I want to get a divorce and, help me out, Master Guns. I heard that you went through a divorce and can you talk to me? It's epidemic. So I would tell Sergeant Ransom, focus on that first. Everything else is secondary.
And with that, we're out. Feel about that?
That was not what I expected. It got a little more deeper than I expected, but it was good.
I've gotten better at the art of the interview.
Yeah, I'll bet. How many have you done?
You're almost 30.
Holy smokes! You
I've
should
only
be getting better by now.
I've only released 16 so far.
Really?
I've been stacking them up, dropping them like seasons, Netflix style.
Nice.
That's the goal. I've got some old hands that I got Tom Dean.
Oh yeah. I know Tom.
I had to edit his a little bit because he started getting a little froggy about the "don't ask, don't tell" repeal. And,
oh, did he?
Yeah, but yeah. I mean that's
he was a company I senior enlisted.
That's part of our history.
Yeah.
But I'm still working on Sarah Clark's. She got a little froggy towards the end.
Did she?
Yeah, she got honest. But some of the things that she was going into are things that transpired early on in her career that had a significant impact on her perspective and her concept of what a woman is capable of accomplishing in the Marine Corps in spite of everything conspiring against her.
Oh, wow.
Some of the others that I have in the can, I did a hot wash of 3 guys who I already recorded an interview with all at the same time with me, smoking cigars, drinking whiskey, and having a good time. And it was Sam Carter, John Stansel, and John Scoggins.
Oh wow, yeah.
But John Scoggins, in true, recent retiree fashion, decided I want to take this into the political area. So I've got to cut some of that stuff. Although he didn't go into the commander in chief, he did talk about certain individuals that are close to the commander in chief that may or may not have testified recently at a congressional hearing. So I was like, yeah, and Sam's like, yeah, we need to cut that. I was like, you're probably right. But the overwhelming response from the community has blown me away.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but like positive. Like this is a very well received thing that you're doing here.
So I actually recently got asked by the Durance aide if I was going to be at the OAG. I think they're contemplating me interviewing all 3 of our generals.
That would be awesome.
That's a little daunting.
Brother, you ready? You said it yourself. You've gotten good at the art of the interview.
But
I mean, can you imagine?
They're all political.
Oh yeah. At that level it is. So you're talking about which generals are you talking about?
Stewart, Seeley, and Henry.
And okay.
I don't know about Reynolds. I don't know if I'm ready for that one.
She's easier to talk to than you think.
Yeah?
Yeah, she is. She's very down to earth. She's smart.
Oh, yeah. I know that.
She's fucking smart. She's a Naval Academy grad.
Did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't either until recently. But she's smart. Seeley's brilliant, too.
Yeah, I know him.
Carter,
I know Stewart and I know Henry.
Do you know Carter?
I don't know Carter.
Jerry Carter. He's the next Durant.
I don't know him.
He's a good guy. He's been interviewed before. Black guy. And he was interviewed for like Black Awareness Month or something. Very professional. Good looking dude. Looks like
Poster boy?
Yeah, poster boy guy. But smart. Intel officer, obviously. And they call him MGySgt Jerry because he spent a lot of time in the special ops community. He's coming over from Fort Bragg. He was the first Marine J2 at JSOC.
Okay.
And so he just got selected and appointed as the next Durant. So he'll be taking over for General Henry here next couple of months. But yeah, Jerry Carter is his name. Former Radio Battalion commander.
Yeah, I knew that about him. I didn't know he was at JSOC though.
Yeah.
So I think all that is dependent on whether or not I can get funding to come down to the OAG.
So let me tell you this. there was a sergeant at Company H who wrote an article in, not Gazette, but one of the other ones. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, the article basically was like, it was kind of a hit piece, but it was very well articulated. I mean, the kid is smart. General Henry reads all that shit. He's very well read. And when he saw this article, he brought the kid, paid for it. So I department put the bill, and I got the call from Master Guns. Forgot his name. He's retiring. I department senior enlisted. Hoffman.
Okay.
Aaron Hoffman.
Yeah.
And Hoffman was like, "Hey, the general wants that kid to come out." I was like, "Are you serious?" "Yeah, you need to get him out here." "Well, we're not paying for it." "No, I department's gonna pay for it." So that kid got to come out as a sergeant. He went out to the OAG. He got to sit in on all of the Council of Colonel meetings.
That's awesome.
They brought him in. Like, the 05s can't even sit in on those.
Right.
They go behind the door and they close the door and all the colonels get together. And that kid was in on every one of them. So
who do you write the hit piece on?
The intel community. He just talked about how we are not good stewards of our resources. Some of it was on the Marine Corps too. I'll have to find that article. I have it. It was in, what's the name of that magazine?
Task and Purpose?
It was was it? It may have been Task and Purpose. It may have been. Yeah, I was going to say because it was 2 words. It probably was Task and Purpose. It wasn't Proceedings. It was, I think it was Task and Purpose. But basically, the Marine Corps, the promotion system, how we promote not based off of, experience and knowledge, but we promote based off of other stuff that's not relevant. I mean, he let it all out. Some of the stuff that he had to say was actually pretty, yeah, you're right. We could probably do that better. But it was just, when you looked at it all in one setting, it was like, okay, I want to choke this kid out. He doesn't really know what he's saying. Right. Like he's looking at it through the eyes of a sergeant at Company H. But General Henry saw it, man. He was like, bring him to the OAG. Yeah. Let him get a little taste of what we look at. And I think it did change his perspective, but he still had a lot of other things to say. Yeah, more shit to say. He was like, "Oh, this is what you guys do at the OAG? Oh, okay." And he was taking notes. Every session he was in, he had a notebook, and he was just pages of notes. And I know because I had to babysit him the whole time. He was on my Come on, let's go. And then General Henry was like, "Where's Sergeant such and such?" "He's right here, sir." "Hey, we having the Council of the Colonels. Make sure he's in there." I was like, my battalion commander would be like, "I can't even go there." He's looking at me, and I'm like, "You gotta talk to the general, sir." Yeah, it was pretty good. Well, Sammy, I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
I appreciate you coming through.
Yeah, brother. It was an honor. Hopefully I didn't stay too long.
No, not at all.
Be a little bit long-winded.
No. My longest episode is over 3 hours.
Holy smokes.